Japan just picked Canada over America. Here is why that matters. Subaru just quietly pulled one of its most iconic models out of US production and did not make a fuss. No protest, no press conference, just a sliding door in the auto map. But that sliding door means something big for Canada. Because when Japanese automakers start turning away from the US, it's not because they hate America, it's because they are done with the chaos. In Canada, we are the calm island in the storm. Stick with me. By the end, you will see how this is not just about cars. It's about trust. It's about industrial sovereignty. And yeah, it's about what it means for Canadian jobs and our economy. Here is what we know. The Subaru Outback, built in Indiana for the US Canadian market, is shifting production. For the Canadian market, it will now be built in Japan. No big media firestorm. That's the point. These kind of changes often happen quietly. It did not trigger instant headlines, but it should have, because it's a signal. You see, most folks believe when an industry is changing, it happens with drama, factory closure, mass layoffs, politicians screaming. But more often, it happens like this: a quiet readout, a logic shift in supply chains, a decision behind closed doors. When Japan's automakers reroute their production lines, the world needs to pay attention. Why now? Because the US auto trade math has gone wonky. Under the Trump administration, the US has stacked up tariffs, parts rules, uncertainty. For example, the US and Japan recently struck a deal dropping Japanese car import tariffs to around 15% after previously threatening 25%. Meanwhile, Canada is sitting under a different lamp. Rules that don't change so erratically. Agreements that remain in place. Japan's automakers looked at that mix and said, "We will stay in North America, but we will steer where the ground is firm." It's not about punishing the US, it's about insulating from instability. Quick pit stop. Hit like and subscribe if you want to support my channel. And join a membership if you want help me keep this channel independent. Thank you. Now back to our topic. So, why Canada? Because we are boring in the best way possible. Consider this. The Japanese Automobile Manufacturers Association says there are 64 Japanese auto parts related manufacturers in Canada today, mostly Ontario. Canada has built up decades of Japanese brand auto investment. The cumulative total since 1985 is about $12.7 billion. That's huge. And as one analysis put it, Canada's auto sector is looking east to Japan right now, as Americans fret over tariffs and supply chain shocks. In short, Japanese firms already trust Canada. They know our factories, our labor force, our politics, and they know we don't have Donald Trump. In a world where trust is in short supply, that means something. Let's zoom out. The Outback is one model, but what's happening more broadly is a structural realignment. Japanese firms are rethinking where they build, which markets they serve, what rules they will live under. Canada is offering the kind of clarity that the US market no longer guarantees. Think about battery supply chains. Think about EVs, mineral sourcing, logistics. Canada is not just playing catch up. We might be finally getting ahead, because when Japan invests in Canada, it's not just a car plant. It's a multi-year, multi-component ecosystem. It demands stability that US cannot offer at this time. Okay, pause for a second. Picture this. You have got two neighbors. One is throwing surprise parties, changing the rules of the yard every week, demanding you pay more for the fence. The other neighbor, quiet, keep the lawn mowed, never makes a fuss. Which neighbor do you trust when you are going to put down roots? Canada just became that neighbor for Japan's auto industry. And yeah, that's the kind of shift that does not look sexy on the front page, but it sets the future. What happens when rules bounce around, costs jump, investments stall, factories idle? For instance, some US auto parts tariffs threatened 25% hike. And that kind of number makes companies redraw maps. The message from Japan: we want to build, but we want to know the game does not change every quarter. Canada wins that battle. It does not have the lowest costs, it does not have the largest market, but it has something rarer: predictable rules. And in 2025, that's gold. You're saying, okay, cool story, but what about me? Here is your payoff: jobs. If more production and value chains get routed through Ontario and other provinces, there are plants, suppliers, workers benefiting, exports. Stronger Canada Japan supply ties means more Canadian made vehicles components for global trade, industrial sovereignty. We are not just a branch plant for US decision making. We are becoming a stakeholding player where global supply chains land. When Japan picks Canada for trust over chaos, that's a win for Canadian manufacturing credibility. Here is the kicker: this is not totally new. In the early 1980s, under the Ronald Reagan administration, Japanese cars were slapped with import limits. Japan responded by building plants in Canada. Now, 4 decades later, the pattern repeats. But the stakes have changed: batteries, EVs, global supply chains, industrial trust. Washington builds walls. Japan walks around them. Canada quietly opens the door. But this time, the price is not just cars. It's the clean energy era. Don't treat this as a one-off. It's a playbook. Japan's automakers are not packing up North America. They are repositioning within it. Canada is the strategic choice in the new map. And this means bigger questions. Will Canada become a battery hub? Will minerals supply chains, lithium, nickel, cobalt, that link Japan and Canada, define the next manufacturing axis? Will the US wake up to the fact that Buy American without stable rules is just throwing sand in your own gears? The answer? We will see. But the trend line is pointed. Here is where Canada cannot just sit back. This is a moment. Governments, provinces, communities need to lean into it. Build infrastructure, secure supply chains, train workers, because trust gets redirected slowly. But once it is redirected, it takes a long time to come back. If Canada wins the quiet production shift, but then screws the landing with delays, lack of investment support, or regulatory chaos, well, that would be embarrassing. Canada has the chance to become the go-to base for Japanese industrial capital in North America. Let's not blow it. What this all means, here it is plain. This is not just about cars made here or there. It's about a change in the geography of trust, risk, and capital. When Japan shifts production away from Indiana towards Canada, or simply chooses Canada as its strategic node, it suggests a reordering. Stability beats scale. Canada did not win because it shouted the loudest. We won because we were quietly consistent. The US still looms large, but in global industrial chess, queen sometimes moves when the king is distracted. So here is your takeaway. If the world keeps changing rules mid-game, Being a country with a stable rulebook becomes a huge asset. In Canada, we are writing that rulebook right now. If digging into moves like this interests you, when you see industrial footprints shift, not in headlines, but in supply chains, I cover this all in my videos. Now, go ahead, next time you see a Japanese brand factory expand or a clean energy plant land in Ontario, you will know what to ask, who trusted whom, and why did they choose Canada. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.